Welcome to Press Coverage. I'm Theo Gremminger. At Press Coverage, I'm looking to bring you the sharpest guests, and I'm looking to help find you the edges you need to win in fantasy football. Getting harder and harder to do that nowadays in the information age, and it's getting harder and harder to do that with all the injuries we're having to deal with in this crazy 2024 year. So I'm really happy to welcome back Jim Coventry. Jim came on with me, I think it was August, Jim. Feels like about 2 years ago at this point. But last Press Coverage, I had Alan Seslowsky on, and everybody was like, we need the really knowledgeable bald guy from RotoWire, not Alan. So they're like, send Jim in. No, just joking. We love Alan. Well, big shout out to the work you're doing over at RotoWire. Jim, how are you doing?
Oh, man, it's week 4. Can't believe it. It used to be the quarter pole for the season. Now it's not quite that 18 weeks, but we're grinding away and having fun.
Yeah, certainly we are. And we talked a little bit in the pre-show bye weeks. This is sort of like the great equalizer where this week you're not able to use your Detroit Lions. Certain things that can kind of shift the weekly outputs for certain fantasy teams. It can provide a lifeline to certain teams who have been at a disadvantage. Maybe teams that have been rolling have to take a step back and sort of test their depth. It tests their planning. Any recommendations you want to make to the people on bye weeks?
You know, hey, with the bye weeks, it depends. Some leagues are short bench, some have longer benches, but realistically, hopefully you draft the depth because that's your depth gets questioned. This is where you separate the big time players from the weaker players. But if there still are waiver wire players out there, if you're looking ahead a couple weeks and you're seeing there's bye weeks and there's a player that you're going to need, be a little proactive on that. But this is the time you actually look at the bye weeks because you might have drafted a team and you might not even have thought about it. Now, all of a sudden you look at week 6, and it's like, oh, I got 4 players out. Address it now before you go pre that week. And then all of a sudden you're stuck.
Yeah, this is why we talk about in the preseason, like paying attention to the bye weeks you have on your roster, because then you might have to make a difficult decision in a shallow bench league, like potentially taking a 0, potentially letting someone go that is valuable to you. This is why you need to be proactive. So I'll ask you, this is not even on the show sheet, but last year we saw some notable usage increases. We usually do post bye week where teams actually have a chance to self-scout and roll out with a slightly different game plan. They see what's working, they see what's not working. But this coming bye week's an interesting one because we have Philadelphia, we have Detroit, and then we have 2 teams with far fewer fantasy viable players, but still the LA Chargers and the Tennessee Titans. Who is one player from those 4 teams that you're most interested in seeing their post-bye week usage?
You know, quite honestly, all the receivers for the Lions, including Laporta. And here's why. I went into the season saying if Detroit is even decent on defense, and I know they gave up a ton of points last night. It was kind of garbage time. But if Detroit has it their way, what do they really want to do? They don't want to throw the football. They want to run the ball 40 times a game if they can. That's what Dan Campbell really wants to do. In past years, they could never do that. So you saw it last night. St. Brown cashed in, but it's not a lot of targets. And Jameson Williams had 20 targets in the first 2 games. What has he had? 5 in the last 2 games combined? Because they're running the ball. Laporta's targets have been down. So I want to see how that defense comes out because we know they like to play press man. They like to bring some heat. If that defense makes a couple of adjustments, comes out a little stronger, I want to see how these pass catchers, how many opportunities they're getting. Goff threw 18 passes last night in a shootout.
Yeah, it's to me, it's Ben Johnson sort of leaning on his strength of the team. And this is a offensive coordinator that gets sort of synonymous with putting up big scoring outputs and got synonymous early on with balance. But Jim, this is the 3rd straight year where we have 2 fantasy viable Lions running backs on a weekly basis. It was DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams his first season, where Jamal sort of flirted with RB1 status, ton of touchdowns. DeAndre Swift sort of hung on to RB2 status. Last year, they almost broke through with 2 RB1s. David Montgomery missed some time. Jahmyr Gibbs finished as RB1. David Montgomery like a very solid RB2. Right now, these guys are both top 9 scorers at the running back position. Do we see 2 running backs from the same team finish as RB1s this year out of Detroit?
You know what? It definitely can happen. And, you know, I somehow am keeping Gibbs ahead of Montgomery in the rankings. I saw the snap share last night, and we started to see Gibbs getting more run. It was like the second half of last season. So I do have Gibbs as my running back 6. That's high. That's high. But I have Montgomery as my 13. That should probably be a little closer. But I do think maybe Montgomery's more like running back 11 and Gibbs is more like running back 9. And I may make that adjustment as I'm looking at it, but I do think, Theo, we have 2 running back ones. And I said it a moment ago, a quick repeat. The Lions defense can be decent. And in games they are not going to pass the ball a lot. I'm going to go back to that. So yeah, we could have 2 running back ones here.
Well, one curveball into the defense could be decent is there's going to be shootouts in this division. Minnesota, Green Bay, these offenses are very, very strong right now, as are the Detroit Lions. So this is a division that could kind of pop off besides Chicago. I want to also pick your brain on a guy that is off to a incredibly slow start, extremely frustrating for fantasy managers. And it sort of has been swept under the rug because people have been really focusing on the players they don't have on their rosters. But it almost would have been better for fantasy managers if Brandon Aiyuk would have spent the first 4 weeks of the season on the IR, because then he wouldn't have been in your fantasy lineup in any single week. Where are we at with Brandon Aiyuk? Your concern level with Brandon Aiyuk? Like, what are we thinking with him?
I mean, we gave him a pass the first 2 weeks of the season because of conditioning. But it's an NFL athlete. 2 weeks is more than enough. At that point, you're conditioned. It is not an issue of that anymore because he was back like a week early before the season. So it's no longer an issue. Now, 3 of the 4 games, he's had exactly 5 targets. He got that 10-target game 2 weeks ago. He does not have a 10-point PPR game this season. And we saw Juwan Jennings go off. Kittle's playing great. Debo's back. I don't know what to do with him because
and Jordan Mason is eating almost every single week, giving you RB1 usage. It's incredibly frustrating. And Jim, all the metrics with Brock Purdy are extremely strong. The downfield passing statistics, like everything about Purdy, there's not like poor quarterback play has held back any of these receivers. You saw it, like you said it, with the Jennings spike week where he gets you the 3 touchdowns, 175 receiving yards in the same game. Like that's what we wanted to see out of Brandon Aiyuk. And that seems like that's what San Francisco wanted to see out of him. This is one of the biggest head scratchers of the entire season.
You know, early in Aiyuk's career, remember he got in the doghouse? Actually, twice. He got in Shanahan's doghouse twice. Once it was pronounced, and it was a real problem. I wonder if Shanahan is harboring some resentment because of how Aiyuk kind of put him in a corner with the contract thing. I know most coaches say business is business, but Aiyuk is one of the best separators in the league, and he's very good at getting downfield. And some people might blame the 2 high shells, but usually Shanahan schemes that away. Normally, he has it schemed up that he can compromise the defense in such a way that it's not there. But it's also possible. The defenses are throwing a lot more confusing looks post-snap this year. And we're seeing it across the league. We're seeing some inconsistencies in moderate passing game performances. It's very possible that defenses are using the 2 high shell and really limiting Aiyuk from the downfield plays, even though Shanahan's a coach. That is a possible understory.
Yeah, I don't even know what to make of it. And it's sort of like you fear you're going to miss the breakout with Brandon Aiyuk. But with him, I almost want to leave him on my bench until I see the breakout in case this is some freaky, like weird regression / lack of usage. Like, I don't even know what's going on. And I think it's a very confusing one for fantasy managers, especially ones that were using like their 4th round pick on Brandon Aiyuk and thrilled when he fell to them in the 5th round during this whole contract dispute. Another situation that's really, really, really tilting right now. And this, I don't know if you think this is a short-term thing, if you think this is something that could kind of hang on throughout the season, but Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson were the 2 backs that non-Christian McCaffrey drafters were betting on as the RB1. And we're going to reveal our rankings. Stick with us. We're going to reveal our rankings a little bit later in the show, our rest of season top 12 at every single position rankings. But with these 2 guys, it's like we had the unknown upside. We have 2 players in their 2nd and 3rd years. Breece Hall gave us the incredible season last year, led all running backs and running back receptions. Bijan Robinson, we had the offensive coordinator change. There was like so much to like about both of these situations. Now they each have increased competition in the backfield. Braylon Allen was one that like is just jumping off the screen every time you watch him play, and they seem to like him. Tyler Algier was just sort of like the thorn in the side that we thought was more of a direct handcuff, but it seems like maybe they're treating him as a handcuff plus. I wonder if you think that their very disappointing week 4 outputs is something that we could see on a continual basis, or was this really like sort of a one-off and you're looking for them to get back on track in week 5?
So start with Breece Hall. Now, he had cashed for PPR the first few weeks because he had 5 catches in the opener, 52 receiving yards and 7 catches the second game. So he's been getting it low level done, but he's been bad for what you drafted him for. This past week against Denver brought the house. They blitzed a lot. I don't know if it's half the snaps, but they blitzed a lot. And it was a real problem. And it was a rainy day out too. That all said, Breece Hall goes 10 carries for 4 yards. And Braylon Allen, obviously, like you said, he looked better. The problem with Hall that we can't figure out is he got it done in the worst possible circumstance last year. They had no quarterback. They had no offensive line. Every defense could gun for him. And yet he was a league winner from like week 5 on. And then obviously his first year, he was in a little bit better of a situation and he dominated as a runner. He's not getting it done at all as a runner this year. He has 1 game with 4 yards per carry. And on the season, 3.1 yards per carry. It has to turn around. I don't know. I cannot quantify what the problem is, but he's Breece Hall. Now, we've seen him, I said this a second ago, be the focal point of defenses. So I'm saying with Breece Hall, this will get right. There's just something, I don't know if it's the new line, cohesion, run blocking, and that is a thing. 4 games, that's about how long it takes a line to kind of coalesce and work together and figure out how to get the timing blocks down. That could be it. Usually Hall doesn't need that. So that said, I do think he turns around. Bijan Robinson, it was weird because after the game,
I'll add the preface. Bijan, anybody who didn't watch the highlights or the game, he had a touchdown called back that was a really questionable holding penalty, Jim. So I think the narrative could have been a little different if he just punched in the end zone. But you get, 80 combined yards for Algier.
And the coach after the game, Theo, said Algier was the hot hand, and I rolled with him. I didn't think that was even in the cards, that if Algier got hot, it was like, okay, we're going to ride you a little bit. The touches weren't much different, but it was clear in the second half of that game. Algier was running hard and getting yards, and they just kept going to him. And so we see the touches for Bijan. Week 123 was okay. He goes on to 18, another 18, and then he goes last week to 11 touches.
Yeah.
That's an unacceptable workload. We were counting on 20 touches a game. And last year, Robinson's getting like 15. So it was a problem with the coaching staff. So usage is a problem here. The coaching staff does not seem overly committed. Like we said, if Algier's playing well, Robinson is going to be not maybe what we expected. He'll have a good floor. You're obviously starting him every week, but right now, I think Hall is more likely to turn around than Robinson. And then offensive line's a bit of a mess too. Their centers on the IR, Dahlman. Now they should get their right tackle McGarry back pretty soon, which will help a little bit. But I'm more optimistic for Hall than I am for Robinson.
I actually took the flip side on this. When I did my running back rankings, I'm actually a little bit more optimistic for Bijan. I have them both in like that running back 4 through 6 range. But for me, it's like, or excuse me, that running back 3 through like 5 range. So it's not like I'm really docking them too much. But for me, it's like I look at the makeup of the Jets and I look at how good Braylon Allen looks. And I think there's a little bit of a disconnect in the fantasy community with the actual threat on Breece Hall right now. And I know this makes people sort of angry because, and I have bags and bags of Breece Hall in redraft and in Dynasty. So I hope I'm wrong. But I think a lot of times when you have the coaching staff with guys like Saleh and guys like Hackett, and they lose a 10-9 game and they self-scout, it might be getting the 240-pound running back more involved in the running game, which makes Breece Hall sort of what he was last year, really dependent on high volume of targets. And to the Jets' credit, they have been targeting the running back position a lot higher than most teams in football. That's been something that we can lean on with Breece Hall. But again, when you were drafting him, you had no idea that there was this sort of threat behind him. And Braylon Allen, this is also a guy who's 20 years old, who's becoming acclimated to the NFL. I think there's a fear there with me. So we can revisit this in the second half of the year. I don't want to delve too much on that. Go ahead, Jim, if you got one more.
Yeah, let me add one thing to that. Braylon Allen is definitely benefiting when Hall's not on the field because the defense right now, they're still skeptical on Aaron Rodgers' defense. They're still skeptical that he's going to come out and carve them up. When defenses are coming out, and Hall should be able to overcome it, but defenses are definitely targeting him when he's on the field. When Braylon Allen's on the field, defense are not targeting him. Defense are more likely thinking, Now we're going to worry about Aaron Rodgers a little bit. We see it all the time. We see the secondary back, who's a good player. He's a fine player, but Breece Hall's a superstar. And defenses are treating it that way. Now, for fantasy, it's fine. For Allen, as long as this goes, you roll. But I'm telling you, once you see Breece Hall get in his groove, the disconnect between those players is here and here. They're not close in talent.
Oh, I agree with you. But I think at the end of the day, it's sort of like an Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon argument in a sense, where there'd be years where you expected Aaron Jones to go nuclear on a weekly basis, but you would have that big, strong back. These coaches are not as smart as you are, Jim Coventry, when it comes to touches. I truly believe that. There's a little bit of like an old school mentality, and it's also the matter of, hey, maybe we'll keep Breece fresher by taking a little bit of the workload off of him, which for real life football might actually be the best outcome, even though it stinks for us as fan fantasy. So this one we will revisit. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Jim and I are going to reveal some trade candidates. We're also going to reveal our rankings for the rest of the season, our top 12. We're going to give you just a little bit of a taste here, but we'll be right back at press coverage.
Hey, this will just take a second. I want to talk about our player rankings, the weekly rankings, the weekly projections. Billy, Theo, and our analytics geniuses getting your start sit decisions dialed in that flex tab. And then you get the season rankings. Want to make add drop decisions? The season rankings are updated every week all year. And you have the best dynasty rankings ever as part of the player rankings package. And don't forget the offensive line rankings. Dan Fornick, one of the best in the business. New running back starting this week. Hey, is that offensive line top 10? Yeah, okay, start them. And we rank the cornerbacks out to like CB 100 with the corresponding receiver they're going to be matched up with most this coming week. The player rankings are the thing you need during the season on PlayerProfiler.com. Check it out.
Welcome back to press coverage. Theo Gremminger with Jim Coventry of RotoWire. Jim, we got to talk about it. We're recording this on Tuesday. The show's going to air on Wednesday, but Miami Dolphins, complete mess. Can we start any Miami Dolphins right now moving forward until we see a quarterback change?
You know, Tyreek Hill got missed on a deep touchdown. It would have been a long touchdown. His fantasy day would have been decent. You start Hill, but you have those diminished expectations.
Low end wide receiver too, Tyreek Hill. It's sad to say.
Yeah, that's it. I got him in my 20s in my rankings. But you have to play him. In terms of combined yards, 42 yards, 4 catches, 8.2 PPR points. It's terrible. But again, he just got missed on an easy touchdown. And that puts him in a good opportunity. So you diminish the expectations. He's obviously not going to carry your team, but he's getting the 7 targets. He had 5 targets last week. So it's enough. It's depressing. Jaylen Waddle, I'm a little more skeptical on because he's more of an underneath player that creates yards after the catch. Defense are compressing everything in on them because there is no concern about the quarterback. And so this offense that is all predicated on spacing and timing, it's gone because, again, even mediocre defenses are putting so many bodies up and pressuring it. It's just not going on right now. Waddle is probably a top 40 receiver right now.
It's absolutely terrible. Davante Achane looked like a potential league winner. Now looks like a guy who just can't do a thing. They missed him on multiple times. He was open last night. Pass attempts like Tyler Huntley. I actually had a little bit of hope that he was going to flash enough fantasy viability that he could kind of lift the ship a little bit. It is in dire straits. Through 4 weeks last year, they had 150 points scored, Jim. Through 4 weeks this year, they have 45 points scored. It is a complete mess in Miami. We had actually a really fun week. A lot of you are going to be in leagues where waivers cleared. Some of you will be listening to this in leagues with Wednesday waivers. We actually have a lot of wide receivers that might be on your waiver wire all in the same week. It's a really fun waiver wire week. Curious your favorite ad out of Xavier Legette, Dontavian Wicks, Josh Downs, Wan'Dale Robinson. All 4 of these guys are available in like 70% of leagues or more. So your thoughts on these 4 guys?
Well, to make this easiest, and they're all good plays. I really think Josh Downs will be better if Flacco makes starts. I don't know that he will make any because Richardson can play this week, but I really unlock Downs if you get Flacco in. It's going to be hit or miss with Richardson. Legette, 2 nice games with Dalton. And I do think with Thielen on the injured reserve, that's going to ramp up a bit. Wicks certainly in the short term is going to be a great option with Watson out. But the player I really gravitate to is Wan'Dale. I drafted him in almost every league, PPR leagues, of course. Well, the thing was, and I've targeted which games he would do his best in. When the Giants are going to see pressure, Daniel Jones has to get the ball out quickly. Wan'Dale plays about 60% of the snaps. They're almost all in the slot because Slayton's the other outside receiver with Nabers. But when that happens, Wan'Dale is the hot read. And Wan'Dale has 6, 7, and 11 catches. The 1 week he didn't, he got a touchdown. But pretty much he's going to have bankable volume in this offense most weeks. And I think he's the player of this group in the PPR league that all year long he'll be relevant for you.
Yeah, I really, really like that one. This is one where I'm recording School of Scott with Scott Barrett over at Fantasy Points every week. Definitely check that one out. But we got a little bit of a Wan'Dale Robinson argument where he wanted to see some of the Wan'Dale targets, like more of them go to Malik Nabers, but Malik Nabers is sort of capped out what he can handle. Like the Wan'Dale gets a 14 target game, the same game Malik gets 15 targets. So the one thing we got to like about this Giants team is the consolidation of the touches, consolidation of the targets. It's extremely easy team to predict. It's as much Malik Nabers as you can handle, a really good amount of Wan'Dale Robinson, and then Devin Singletary most weeks has been like a usable RB2. So we like that. There's no like, hey, this new player is going to start getting touches. Keep that away. We'll take it. If it's going to be it's going to be a sort of a bottom half offense, but one that we sort of like for fantasy purposes. Daniel Jones giving you like QB 17 production with that team as well. Wan'Dale, I think, is sort of polarizing, but it feels a little like the random Hunter Renfrow wide receiver 1 season. A guy who can just get open. He's utilized. And I think one thing that people lose disconnect with Wan'Dale Robinson, this guy was like a top 40 pick in the NFL draft. He was an early second-round pick. So Wan'Dale Robinson, they've been waiting for years. He's dealt with injuries, and it's a guy who gets open. He fits with Daniel Jones's skill set, and he takes a lot of pressure off of Malik Nabers. So we'll stick with that one. I think I'm in agreement with you. Although I do think Dontavian Wicks, if it was like a waiver wire decision based on the quality of the offense, based on his spike week viability, I think he could play so well that Christian Watson comes back and Watson's a little bit more in the Wicks role. I mean, like if we had a 13 target game with 2 touchdown catches for Christian Watson, we'd all be losing our minds. But it's sort of the assumption that Watson owns that job. I don't know about that. I think Wicks has been good. Jordan Love and LaFleur have both singled him out as a guy that they think is talented. So really fun week. Make sure you grab one of these wide receivers on your team. So we want to talk a little bit about trades. We've reached that point in the season. You're starting to see some teams in panic mode in your redraft leagues. You have bye weeks to consider. We each have a couple players to trade for. Let's stick with Jim. You want to talk about I have your 2 of your wide receivers and 1 of your running backs to share as players to trade. Anybody jump out at you want to discuss first?
You know, the player's amazing. Situation couldn't be better. But I would tell somebody right now to trade Malik Nabers. Why? He's on a 221 target pace. That's the first thing. Second thing is, at some point, Daniel Jones is not a good quarterback. Nobody's going to argue with me on that one. At some point, defense are going to say, this is the only guy who can beat us. The only player. And if we have to put extra people on him, if we've got to put cloud coverage over him, if we've got to put strict double coverage on him, and they played. Minnesota's given the 3rd most fantasy points to receivers. Washington's given it the most. Cleveland's had their issues. Dallas has no pass rush. So Malik Nabers and Dallas has no corners. Yeah, the Diggs is fine, but other than that, nothing. At some point, defense are going to say, you know what? Nabers, you ain't beating us. And Daniel Jones isn't the quarterback. I think that could lift him. But the 221 target pace, it's only if you can get a mother load deal back for Nabers. If you could get Chris Godwin and another starter and a running back, because you might be able to get the moon for him. You don't sell him unless you get the moon. But that 221 target pace, nobody gets that. Davante Adams didn't get that.
Yeah, I think that's a really tough one for people to make that deal. I don't, obviously he's not going to get 200 targets, but I do think that he could get 160 targets, and I think that he could get a little bit more efficient with the targets. Nabers is it's just a tough one to trade. I mean, again, if you could get back a top 6, top 7 wide receiver, if you get back AJ Brown plus that kind of deal, then I'm looking to make that trade potentially. It's just difficult when we've seen him flash this immense talent. We know that his weekly role is just locked in on this offense. I'll give you a sell for me. I have a couple of running backs that I just want to look to get out from under. I want to look to get out from under Travis Etienne. Absolutely a sell low, but sometimes a sell low is not the worst thing to do. It's a perfect player to put in a 2-for-1. I talked about this 2 weeks ago with Rachaad White, getting out from under Rachaad White before like sort of the takeover happens. I worry about Tank Bigsby with Travis Etienne. I think you're still going to have people in your league with sort of ADP take lock and redraft take lock. Like, you know, where Travis Etienne was when you were drafting is so far from his current role and this Jacksonville offense. I'm looking to get out from under him. He's almost the kind of guy that's sinking you every single week. You're putting him in there. He's giving you this very, very low end production. Another player that it would have been more wise to sell him earlier in the season when he had his big, huge spike week, but Josh Jacobs. And it sort of goes counterintuitive with the Jordan Love comes back. But to me, it's the passing game is now opened up completely. And we're seeing Emmanuel Wilson mixed in, Marshawn Lloyd potentially down the line. So for me, it's like Josh Jacobs. People are going to have that Tennessee or Indianapolis game fresh on their minds where he went nuts on the ground. He gave you all those first half rushing yards. But I think that with Jordan Love coming back, it's going to be way less sort of dependent on Josh Jacobs. And I think people are always willing to pay for running back volume and good offenses.
One more sell, Theo. Mike Evans. Here's my point on Mike Evans. In the first 3 games, he had 15 total targets. And then Todd Bowles went out and told the offensive coordinator, I want Evans more involved. So the squeaky wheel came last week, and Evans gets 14 targets. This offense runs through Chris Godwin. It's the Liam Cohen offense, which is the Sean McVay offense. You see the way they put the receivers, and they put them stacked in close to the line, just like McVay does. You scheme open a slot type of guy. Evans is not a perfect fit for this offense. You could force him the ball, but it has to be in games where there's no pass rush, because Baker Mayfield is real sensitive to the pass rush, and Philly didn't have one. It was a directive to get him targets. So Evans coming off that 14 target game, which is one less target than he had in the first 3 games combined. This is the time you sell him, because people know Hall of Famer just had a big game. He's going to roll in this offense. You sell him now and see what you can get back for him. Because again, like I said, Godwin really is a centerpiece of this offense.
So we're not all negativity. Give us a player that people should be going out and buying right now.
Let's see. We got I would buy Kyler Murray. Murray's coming off the disaster game, and that's when you want to buy. They played Washington, and Washington's defense shouldn't scare anybody, but yet Kyler Murray, 142 yards, 1 touchdown. He ran for 3 yards. It was disgusting. Well, in the first 3 games, Kyler Murray ran for at least 45 yards. So he's running, and running, as we know, running is king at the quarterback position. This disaster week, I can't explain what happened, but it's the NFL. Weird things happen every week. But Kyler Murray, right now, this is the time to buy him.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. And I think anybody sort of looking to get out from Kyler Murray, like we both have Kyler Murray as a top 5 quarterback rest of the season. We've already seen how good he looks at times. You also had Trey McBride missing, and that's a massive loss for that offense. That was a guy getting like tight end 1 overall type usage. McBride is my tight end 1 rest of the season. So for me, it's like, yeah, any chance you can get a player off of a bad game, Kyler Murray, that's it. For me, one quarterback that I'm looking to trade for, that I have the utmost confidence in this offense, we saw this offense have like 2 kind of stalled out games. The Detroit game that they won, and then certainly the Denver game. But I think the fact that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers could come back that quickly and turn things around with such an impressive offensive performance against Philadelphia, I'm looking to trade for Baker Mayfield. I think that there's a disconnect with where people see Baker Mayfield and where he's going to end up. I think this is going to be the career year for Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield, of course, gives you a QB1 season last year. I think this year, Jim, legitimately, he could flirt with top 6 QB numbers. I think he's probably going to, he's a little lower than that in my rankings. But I think that this is also an interesting strategy. If your team started out slowly with like a more high-profile quarterback, trading from a higher profile quarterback to get Baker Mayfield and a piece that can immediately enter your lineup might be a 2-for-1 that can support your team and your chance to maybe recover from like a 1-3 start, potentially an 0-4 start. Like Baker Mayfield, to me, is QB3 on the season. If you ask your league mates where he was at in terms of the QB scoring, no one's going to say QB3. It's like a real disconnect here, but it's sort of the idea that he's going to regress, he's going to regress, he's going to regress. The guy looked fantastic, gave us a 4-touchdown pass week in week 1, gave us just shredded Philadelphia. You mentioned Godwin. There's Mike Evans. And I think that the turn to Bucky Irving is going to help this offense because it's going to give you more big playability instead of these like Rachaad White falls into the line type runs we're seeing often early in the year.
I will say this, and I love your call on this. I do love Baker Mayfield. I did a quick video, which we put up in the RotoWire socials on Monday. It was a 1-minute video on Mayfield. But I said, we already know what he is this year. It's all about what pressure they see. They played Washington, who can't pressure at all, 4 touchdowns and 289 yards. Philly has no pressure. Once in a while, Jalen Carter gets a little interior pressure. They have no pressure. He throws for 347 and 2. Now, the 2 games he saw pressure, Denver, 163 yards, a touchdown and a pick. The Detroit game, fortunately, he ran one in because he only threw for $185 and a touchdown and a pick in that game. So the games he saw pressure, he was a problem. Again, that rushing touchdown bailed him out. Good. That was nice. I'm glad he had it. But the teams, he doesn't see pressure. So to me, acquire him, but have another quarterback, because I really think if you see a team with a big pass rush coming in, you got to sit him those weeks if you can.
That's a great point. I do that was a fun one. That Detroit game, he gave you back-to-back 11-yard runs to sort of like cap that drive and gave the sort of the nastiest juke that you've seen any quarterback drop this year. And it was Baker Mayfield. I just love Baker at the end of that game, Jim. They told him that his 11-yard touchdown run was the longest of his career. And he was like, that's pathetic. He kind of made fun of himself for that. I thought that was great. So I don't know. I think butting heads a little bit there. I do think that this offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, we've already seen sort of adjustments. You've seen Kate Otten have an uptick in usage over the last 2 weeks. Maybe that's to sort of alleviate the pressure, because it was completely opposite game scripts with Otten seeing increased usage. So I don't know. This guy Cohen, to me, seems like he knows what he's doing. They're definitely a different offense than we saw with Canales last year, but I do think this is a team that could be getting better as the season moves along. So we'll kind of revisit that one as well. For me, another player to go trade for right now, the fantasy community has not fully shifted to what Diontae Johnson is with Andy Dalton. Diontae Johnson's had back-to-back weeks with a 30+% target share. He had a ridiculous air yard share in week 3. He's basically getting the Mike Evans usage from last year with the Dave Canales offense, but even more heavily targeted. We talked about Xavier Legette, but the loss of Adam Thielen sort of makes even more pressure on Diontae. Diontae Johnson has given you a 26-point week and a 21-point week. I have him, Jim, as a wide receiver 1 rest of season. I would rather have him than a lot of players ranked ahead of him. And I think he's a perfect player to go get in like a 2-for-1. There's still some fantasy managers out there that will consider a Tyreek Hill for a Diontae Johnson right now, because they're take locked onto how they viewed these players in August, even though we're in October 1st. Diontae Johnson is going to have a fantastic year.
I love the way you frame that, because take lock is a part of this thing. People think Diontae Johnson is something, think Andy Dalton something. Look, Andy Dalton may be a lot of things. He's a professional quarterback that can get the ball to somebody who's open. And Diontae Johnson has shown us for years he gets open. One of the best receivers in the beginning of a route to get instantly open. Probably top 5 to 8 in that range. Now, does he get yards after the catch always? Not always. So what? For PPR, he's piling up the points, and he's actually doing better than that this year. So you're right in doing that. We also have to mention they played Cincinnati, no defense. The Raiders are bad on defense. But that said, you still go to Diontae Johnson because this defense is terrible. They lost Shaq Thompson. They've already lost Derek Brown weeks ago. They've got J.C. Horn and nobody else. So they're going to trail almost every week. So, Theo, by your call there, I could see Johnson having a lot of games with double-digit targets. So you're right. If you could get him, definitely go after him.
Yeah, and we've seen it before. He's got 3 years with 140+ targets in Pittsburgh. He sort of looked like peak Diontae Johnson, like Ben Roethlisberger Diontae Johnson, with Andy Dalton behind center. And what's interesting is we brought up that Las Vegas game. He also had a career high in receiving yards that week. So this is like newfound category for him. Very much into Diontae. Give us a buy, Jim.
So another player that we could buy right now would be A.J. Brown, because he's been injured. And I think people are skeptical. Look, Jalen Hurts doesn't look great. And I think people are seeing that, oh my gosh, he's not the same player he was in that Super Bowl year. But the whole thing is, A.J. Brown right now, he had 5 catches for $119 and a touchdown in the opener on that sloppy field in Sao Paulo in the opener. But I think that people have been without him for a few weeks. He's on a bye this week. Some might worry that the hamstring might be an issue. Remember Justin Jefferson last year, it lingered on. See what you could do to rattle a cage for A.J. Brown, because the defense, as we figured, is not going to be good for Philly. They're going to give up a lot of points. They're going to have to throw the ball. Saquon Barkley's giving them some balance, but ultimately, A.J. Brown is going to have to get a very high target share for this team to be the competitive level they want to be. Don't know, again, what you'll be able to trade off to acquire him, but I think A.J. Brown's a player you definitely want to get now, because I think the perception is a little lower than it should be on him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a player that you could probably get for a guy like it be a tough one to trade because DK is in such a fantastic spot, but potentially the ceiling outcome for an A.J. Brown in the second half of the year, healthy, might be higher than like a DK Metcalf. We've seen it in most years of their career. DK's gotten off to this incredibly fast start. I think a Chris Olave for a AJ Brown is something that I can stomach. And AJ Brown's also a guy that you might be able to acquire in 2-for-1. Another sort of cheat code with trades in redraft is buying guys on bye weeks. Some managers cannot support it. They want a player they can use right now. I've been there in the past, Jim, where you trade away a guy in a bye week because you're desperate. Take advantage if your team is in decent shape and sit on that 0 this week from AJ Brown. Give us one more player to trade for, Jim.
You got to trade for Drake London right now. He does not have a 70-yard game. He only has the 2 touchdowns in weeks 2 and 3, but he has not been what many hoped he would be. But the targets have gone up every week from 3 to 7 to 9 to 12. He's beginning to see that alpha level target share. Kirk Cousins is still developing chemistry with him. Last week, the New Orleans matchup on those 12 targets, those outside corners are good against physical receivers. So that was kind of like a stylistically bad matchup. But the way Drake London is becoming a big part of this offense now, he's a superstar. We haven't seen it quite yet. It is coming. And as they galvanize together a bit, this is a great time to buy Drake London.
I love it. Definitely kick the tires. This is the time of year to try to get some of these trades done. You also have, this is sort of like when you get to week 5, everybody's sort of in it mentality. Sometimes if you wait too long, you're not going to get as many deals done. I know a lot of people say, wait till teams are desperate. This year is different. People are shifting desperation levels like you usually see teams in like week 7 and week 8. Jim, we've reached that part of the show. We are each going to reveal our top 12 at each position. Why don't we start out? You pick the position, and you're our guest. You're going to give us the number 1 at that spot.
All right, let's go with wide receiver, because I want to say I have my number 1 as Nico Collins of the Houston Texans. Look, CeeDee Lamb's not getting targets. Justin Jefferson's really not getting high-level targets either. Amon-Ra St. Brown, they're not getting the target share. Well, guess who is getting the target share? And guess who has C.J. Stroud? And guess who has teammates at receiver who are not quite playing at superstar level? All works together. I got Collins my number 1, Theo.
Okay, so I don't think that's too crazy. I think if we were drafting tomorrow, Collins would be like a top 6, top 7 pick. For me, I am going to go Justin Jefferson. I've seen enough out of Darnold. I know Jefferson's going to give us these spike weeks, and I think that as the season moves along, the comfort level with him and Darnold is going to get even better. So for me, it's Jefferson at the 1. Who do you have at the 2?
I put CeeDee Lamb there. I don't like the target volume so far, but Dallas, look, they're down their pass rushers now. They're hemming and hawing. They probably lost Lawrence and Parsons, probably each for a month. Maybe Parsons sneaks back a little bit sooner. But if they're not right coming back, they're going to have to throw all day, every day. That's how they kind of are looking now. But the bye week is whenever Dallas gets to their bye. Hopefully after that, they get even better with it. But in the short term, they have to focus heavily on getting Lamb back in. So he's my number 2.
Number 2 for me, Nico Collins. Number 3 for me, CeeDee Lamb. I'm assuming you have Jefferson at the 3 spot, Jim.
Of course. Yeah, okay, Jefferson my number 3.
So we're in lockstep for our top 3, but in different ways. Number 4 for you is?
I put Amon-Ra St. Brown there. I am worried about the rushing attack taking over, but he has just been a gold standard for that team. And whenever they need a big play, he seems to have it for them.
I'm on Amon-Ra as well. 5 for me is Malik Nabers. I know you're listing him as a potential sell, but Jim, the wide receiver 1 for 3 straight years has been the player with the most targets and the most receptions. So Malik Nabers, I think we could be in uncharted territory with a rookie wide receiver finishing as wide receiver 1 overall. It's in the wheelhouse if Daniel Jones is just somewhat normal over the second half of the year. Who do you have at wide receiver 5?
I have A.J. Brown just ahead of Malik Nabers. I want to say one thing with Nabers. You pointed out earlier, I like the comment you made. You go, he might not get 220 targets, but he might get 160. Well, if he gets 160, already 50 of those are gone because he already gave up 50 of those. I think it might be more than 50 in 4 games. And so if he gave up 50, that means there's only 110 targets left.
Okay, I adjust, Jim. 180. I meant 180 then. There you go. When you use your math like that, I like that one. So you said A.J. Brown, and then you had Nabers as your wide receiver 6?
I do.
Wide receiver 6 for me is JaMarr Chase. Who do you have at 7?
I have Chase at 7 because I don't think he's had more than 6 targets in a game. And I don't know what the heck they're doing, but they are not throwing him the football. I still have him at 7, but it's insane how they're not getting him the football.
Yeah, it's sort of things will work out. And maybe they'll work out this week with Baltimore. Chase is too good. And this team is still like looking for answers. Like we did see some changed usage with Chase Brown. Like you've seen Eric All now for 3 straight weeks with 4 catches. I think things are sort of shifting. They're still trying to figure out what they are. But one thing that they'll figure out over the second half of the year is getting JaMarr Chase the football. He had 100 catches last year. I think we'll end up somewhere in that wheelhouse this year when it's all said and done. And for me, my wide receiver 7, A.J. Brown. So we're sort of in lockstep there. Wide receiver 8, though, for me, and I wanted to rank the guy higher because I'm all over this player. 2 games with Jordan Love, Jayden Reed, War Daddy Reed. This is your potential league winner. This is my wide receiver 8 overall right now. I think like the Jordan Love, Jayden Reed connection is going to be awesome. And this is a player that's not like this insane target earner, but he's so explosive. The play design is so strong for him. He's had 2 games with Love, and he's had 138 and 139 yards. Plus, he gave you that long rushing touchdown in Brazil. War Daddy. This is a player that we should have been drafting rounds earlier.
I have Jayden Reed. I know we're going later, but I have him as my 12, and it probably didn't put him high enough, Theo. I probably did not put him high enough. Yes, I don't disagree with your ranking at all. And I may revisit mine, and I may move him higher because he is a legitimate superstar in a great situation. My number 8, I did put Chris Olave there. 380+ yard games in a row. You just see him. He gets open, and he runs such great routes. And you see now the new offense. It was supposed to be weaponized to Clint Kubiak to use that alpha on a lot of those crossers. They're running on all go routes last year, and that was never going to work. But we're starting to see who he really is. Now we got to see if the hamstring is okay. I thought it was, and there was a touchdown he just missed out on last week. But you know what? Now when you say Jayden Reed, it's going to be hard not to put Jayden Reed. I probably should move him up where you have him at the 8 spot.
Yeah, and I have Olave at 9. Like Olave to me, every week with the target share, we've seen the spike weeks with him. This is, again, a consolidated offense. And he was able to thrive in the same week as Rashid Shaheed last week. This is an offense that I think is solid. I think Kubiak gets it, and I think Olave is going to have strong weeks. So Olave, it's sort of hard to rank him too low. For me, 10 is DK Metcalf. Who's your 10?
I have Metcalf as 10 as well, and I have Godwin ahead of him at 9. As I said earlier, the offense is running through him, and it's that McVay offense, and we are seeing Godwin used in the Cup type or the Kua type role. But I'm with you, DK Metcalf at 10, man among boys. He has a coach right now that is willing to weaponize him, unlike the prior staffs they had there. So love to call him Metcalf at 10. Totally with that.
Yeah, and for me, 11 Diontae Johnson, 12 Marvin Harrison Jr. I left both Tampa Bay wide receivers outside because I think that those guys are going to cannibalize one another. They'll both finish like wide receiver 14 through 18 range, which is totally good for my Baker Mayfield argument that they both are a little bit balanced. Why don't you give out your final wide receivers in your top 12?
So it was really tough to put an 11 that I wanted, and I'm buying into the smoke that the Raiders are going to trade Davante Adams. Apparently now they're open to do it. So I made an aggressive move of moving Adams to 11. He has the hamstring right now, and I don't know how long that's going to tie him up. But that said, it was a speculation pick, and I did put Jayden Reed at 12. But like I said, I'm going to go revisit my rankings. I am going to move him up. He needs to go higher.
Yeah, War Daddy to the moon, Jim. There's literally nowhere too high for him. That's my guy. I wish I had 100% exposure to him right now. Let's go a little quicker for quarterback because we got to get you out of here. You just go quarterback one, I'll go QB one, and back and forth.
I just put Josh Allen number one. There were two bad games, but the two huge games, he's still Josh Allen.
Yeah, and for me, I moved Lamar up to QB one just because I love this offense. So I'm going to go Lamar at one. Who's your QB two?
I have Lamar at number two, so no argument there.
And I went Jayden Daniels at QB two.
Who I put at three right now. I'm still worried about him in injury risk because he's taking too many hits and he's tiny and it's eventually, but right now, how do I argue?
Yeah, how can you argue? And Josh Allen for me, QB3, which is probably super low. But we have seen like two sort of ugly-ish output games. Yeah, so it's it's less consistent. And at the end of the day, Jayden Daniels so accurate. That offense is trending up for me. QB4, Kyler Murray. Who do you have it for?
I put Jalen Hurts there just because, again, just like Murray, they run. And A.J. Brown's coming back, and their defense is bad. They're going to score points. But now I did have Murray at 5, so I'm right with you there.
Yeah, and for me, I have Jordan Love at 5, and I have Jalen Hurts at 6.
And I came in with Jordan Love at 6. So, yes, right there. Love doesn't run a lot. And as you notice, all my top 5 quarterbacks are all runners.
Yeah, you gotta love the rushing output. And that's another thing about like Daniels. We've seen 88 rushing yards. I bet you we have like 130-yard game somewhere in the near horizon. He's so good. For me, it's 7, Dak Prescott, 8, CJ Stroud, Baker Mayfield at 9. I could have moved all three of those guys around one another. Who do you have at 7, 8, 9?
So Prescott at 7 as well. I put Mayfield at 8. I said earlier the caveats, but yeah, I love him there. I put Purdy at 9 for the floor. I moved Stroud down to 10. Do you know, Theo, he has one game with more than 2 touchdowns in his 2 seasons?
I knew that stat. And I also know that it's very funny because fantasy football managers, we have this love of Bobby Slowick as like this really smart guy. There is some discontent in the Texans fan base about Bobby Slowick as a play caller. You had that Minnesota game was sort of like a chance to pile on. They beat Jacksonville. I'm just of the opinion that we have Diggs, we have Nico Collins, Tank Dell's going to be coming back, and this is still a very young player. I'd like to think that CJ Stroud is going to turn it around, but maybe he is just a low-end QB1, and we sort of overrated the ceiling of this offense, and it's a little bit more conservative than we had planned. So that's
Theo,
one
real quick on him. Quick on him. So I feared in the preseason when they cut all 3 of their fullbacks, they really ruined their offense, in my opinion. Because when they cut the whole predication of that Slowick offense was Shanahan offense, Mike McDaniel offense, where you have a fullback, the defense have to bring an extra player in to defend the run, and everything's open over the top. And when they cut all 3 of them, they became a base 3 receiver team. They were automatically, you see, the highest of high shells, and Stroud is going to have to win underneath. He's a great quarterback, but they took away what gave them a hammer advantage over opponents last year. And we see it right now. That's a problem for CJ Stroud.
Yeah, I hear you for sure. And I'll just give my 10, 11, 12. And this was really hard to rank this range.
Mm-hmm.
I went Purdy at 10, Geno at 11, and Justin Fields at 12. I left Joe Burrow out of the top 12. We both left Patrick Mahomes out of the top 12, and it made me upset to leave Sam Darnold out of the top 12, who's playing as in like this incredible way. So I really think once you get to like 10 through 16, it really could bounce around a lot. Not a whole lot of edge here, but I do think Fields is trending up. Geno, I believe in the offense, and Purdy, all the metrics look good for him. Maybe Brandon Aiyuk turns things around, Jim. How's your 10, 11, 12?
Yeah, very similar to yours. I have Geno at 11. We had Stroud at 10, Geno at 11. Now, Burrow and Fields, I just flipped them with you. I had Burrow 12, Fields 13. Like you said, coin flip there. They're very close. I'd put Darnold at 14 and then Mahomes at 15 because Mahomes has not been, since the second half of last season, he's not been a QB1.
It's insane. But Patrick Mahomes, like, I'm going through mental gymnastics on certain dynasty rosters that are contenders to try to make that flip. He's sort of like the modern Tom Brady now, Jim, one that is like so excellent in real life football, but doesn't give us that ceiling in fantasy. And I know that's sort of like a difficult thing for people to swallow, but there's plenty of statistics to back this up. and this is more, with this group, he's got to become sort of a game manager. It's a terrible situation. That's a whole show to begin with, but let's quickly rip through our running backs, Jim. I know you got to go soon. Start out with your RB1.
I put Saquon at number one. Look, the usage is there. The offensive line's there. The receiving weapons will be back. Love Saquon.
Yeah, this is sort of hey, anybody who's drafting old guys, you win, because I've got Saquon 1, I've got Derrick Henry 2.
Same thing. And here's the thing. First 2 weeks, I was ticked with the Ravens. Patrick Ricard was on the field 24% of the time. They're throwing the ball to Isaiah Likely, and they're throwing it to Justice. I go, their season's over. They're doomed. And then they finally figured it out in week 3. They got their identity. Ricard's playing more than half the snaps. He's helping the line, and Derrick Henry is running over everybody.
And for me, 3, I will be stubborn. I will keep some take lock from the preseason. Bijan Robinson will turn things around. Bijan Robinson, I'm going to talk myself into it. Bijan Robinson stays at RB3. Probably a little too high, Jim, but I'm going to leave him there.
I put him there too. Look, he's getting receiving usage. And just like the mobile quarterbacks, the running backs who are receivers have an inherent advantage. And I put Breece Hall 4th for that reason as well.
I went 4th. I'm going to be extra bullish on JaMarr Gibbs. I think he looks awesome. And this is an offense that I think post-bye week could utilize him even more. I know David Montgomery is playing great, but that's sort of the only argument against JaMarr Gibbs right now is his backfield competition. But Gibbs is the guy with the juice. If they're going to go to a Super Bowl, I think they need to ride Gibbs. I realize Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Laporta, there's tons of guys there. But Gibbs, I just think, has that immense bike week. This is not a super jump. He's RB8. For him to go to RB4 would not be a massive leap. So RB4 for me, Gibbs. RB5 for me, Breece Hall. RB6, Alvin Kamara.
I have Kamara at 5. Volume is king in fantasy football. Is that simple. He's getting a ton of work, and I put Gibbs at 6, so I'm not far off from you. I did come back with Jonathan Taylor at 7, although I really want to see how serious his ankle injury is because that could really tank it. And then at 8, I went with Kyren Williams because, again, volume is king in fantasy football.
I went with Kyren Williams at 7. I went with actually Aaron Jones at 8. I'm very bullish on this Minnesota offense continuing to get better. Greatest show on turf part 2. I think this team might make a real run in the NFC. I know there's people out there saying we're cursed. Theo, it's not going to happen. We're the Minnesota Vikings, but I love this team. They're getting pressure on the quarterback on defense. Brian Flores looks like he's going to get another head coaching job. And this offense continues to make tweaks. And I think TJ Hawkinson coming back. We saw Jordan Addison last week. Like Aaron Jones is poised to have a really strong season as long as he can stay healthy. You brought up Jonathan Taylor. I had dropped him down, but I have Jones at 8, Ken Walker at 9. I really believe in the Ryan Grubb offense. 10 for me is Taylor. 11, James Cook. 12, Jordan Mason. But like that bottom RB1, I could bounce around a number of guys. Where are you at? Maybe finish out your rankings for the running back.
And the only reason I left Jordan Mason out is because if McCaffrey comes back for the fantasy playoffs, that would really tank it all for him. But otherwise, you're right. You leave him there. I have Mixon at 9 and Aaron Jones at 10. Mixon in this offense, we kind of saw earlier when he was healthy what his role was. Jones, I can't argue with you, put him higher because I always said he's a superstar and he's finally getting work. I put James Cook at 11. I do remember last year after all the overuse, he had 2.64 yards per carry in his last 5 games. And I think if they give him too much work, that could happen again. And I put James Conner as my running back 12. I know he'll miss 3 games, but when he's out there, 3 of his 4 games, he's just been a fantastic producer.
Yeah, pick up Trey Benson, everyone. He's sort of been cut in a lot of leagues, had 50 rushing yards last week, and Jim nailed it. This is a offense where we're seeing production out of the running back spot, but we know James Conner is going to miss some time. Trey Benson might give you like 5 strong weeks this year. You never know. Let's quickly rip through the tight end rankings. I don't even want to do this one. I don't even want to do tight end right now, Jim. Tight end 1 for me, Trey McBride. Tight end 2, I'm sick to my stomach doing it, but Travis Kelce back to tight end 2. I wanted to completely fade him this year. He's got the complete lifeline now. I'm not excited about it. I think you could list him as a trade candidate, Jim, because he had 12 targets in the first 3 games, 9 targets when Rice goes down. But that's my top 2, McBride and Kelce.
Rice was actually running Travis Kelce routes in the first 4 weeks or 3 weeks till he got hurt. And now Kelsey's running Kelce routes. And look, they have nobody else. They have nobody else. So Kelsey's my 1, McBride's a 2. I'm with you. I have to put him there because we saw last week when they had to use him, would he go 8 for 79? And in the tight end landscape this year, that's bankable.
Tight end 3 for me, Brock Bowers. Tight end 4, Dalton Kincaid. tight end 5, George Kittle, tight end 6, Sam Laporta. Laporta is an interesting one, though. Laporta, we could see like the squeaky wheel gets the grease post-bye week. That could also be an adjustment with Detroit. But I have to rank Laporta not where he was last year, but sort of what he is this year. 6 is almost generous with the sort of usage we're seeing out of him. Some promise last night's game, Jim, but we're just not seeing that the raw target totals, the end zone looks, all that stuff we saw last year. So I put him at 6.
Yeah, and with you, I flipped 3 and 4. Kincaid 3, Bowers 4. We're right in locks. I've just flipped them a little bit, no problem there. I put Ferguson as my my tight end 5. Dallas is going to have to throw. Prescott's always loved the tight end since the second half of last season. Ferguson's been one of the more consistent tight ends. So especially this year when it's been a train wreck. I put Kittle at 6. They're using him a little more than they had. I know he missed the game. I put Laporta at 7. Jameson Williams in the mix, and I know the last week the targets have been there. But Jameson Williams adds an element to that offense they desperately needed. I did come back at 8, though, with Evan Ingram coming back from the injury. He should be able to see enough targets there. And I put Goddard at 9.
Yeah, I have Jake Ferguson at 7. I probably am too low on him, but I always have a Jake Ferguson bias, Jim. Evan Ingram at 8. The guy was the top 5 tight end for back-to-back seasons. When he comes back, he's going to be utilized. I actually put Pat Freiermuth at 9. I think I'm a little bit bullish on this offense, using him more. Multiple wide receivers hurt. Jalen Warren hurt. Cordell Patterson hurt. I think Muth, you'll start seeing a little bit of consistency there. 10 for me was Njoku, Goddard at 11, and Tucker Kraft comes in at 12. I love the Green Bay Packers passing game with Jordan Love.
I love the Tucker Kraft call. He's seeing a ton of snaps and he's seeing more targets. Now, I have my Freiermuth at 10, just one spot behind you. So we agree that he has at least 4 catches in every game. And again, this year, that means something. I put Njoku at 11 just because the line is such a disaster in Cleveland and Deshaun Watson's a disaster. Maybe if Winston comes in, I'll move him up. And I didn't know who to put number 12. Coming off a big ripe 0, I put Kyle Pitts there. But like you said, Tucker Kraft is as good a choice. Conklin could go there. I have no clue who to put 12.
The tight end position is disgusting. We're hoping that we get a TJ Hawkinson coming back in the near term and sort of like a life preserver. I noticed you had him a little bit lower in your rankings. You're basically anticipating him coming back a little later than I maybe am, Jim. Where are you at on that?
Yeah, there's 2 things. First, I don't expect until Halloween, and that's another 4 weeks probably.
Yeah.
But even then, he had no reps with Sam Darnold. So he's walking into a situation where Darnold's going to have chemistry with Jefferson, chemistry with Addison, chemistry with Aaron Jones, and I just don't know how he's going to fit that in.
That's a good point, but it's sort of like life finds a way when you're TJ Hawkinson. The guy produced in Detroit, gets off the plane, and he's catching passes from Kirk Cousins, gives us that strong. So I think they'll figure it out. Halloween, it's sort of a difficult thing to stomach, but he could be a guy that really helps you in the fantasy playoffs. And a guy who could help you win your fantasy playoffs is Jim Coventry. If you like listening to Jim discuss his player rankings, make sure you're tuning in. Jim, when can they find your shows on RotoWire and Sirius Satellite Radio?
Yeah, RotoWire is a fantasy football only YouTube page. I do videos there Monday, Wednesday, and Sunday. We do short videos all the time as well. Sirius XM Fantasy Channel 87, Saturdays 2 to 4 Eastern. Game day Sunday morning 9 to 10 Eastern. And on the X at Jim Coventry NFL always points you to my work at RotoWire. You want a free trial at RotoWire? We love Player Profiler. You want something a little different to add to the great Player Profiler, rotowire.com/Jim. 2 days, no credit card. Check us out. But Player Profiler, that's the stuff.
Yeah, and make sure you're paying attention to sleepers, streamers, and stashes. Dropping my sleepers video and podcast end of the week right here on Player Profiler YouTube every single week. That's been helping some people out. We had the Juwan Jennings game, Jim. We gave him Juwan Jennings. We gave him the 4-touchdown Darnold game. So we're trying to help you win in fantasy. Check out School of Scott. I'm doing that on another channel with Scott Barrett. Subscribe to that podcast. And stick with us here at Player Profiler. We got you covered all season long. Make sure you're checking out my guy, Jim Coventry, as well. We'll see you soon with another press coverage.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.